Ethel Bradbury was never late for work, but today she arrived at the studio an hour earlier than usual. The dressing room was empty and cool. She loved these moments of solitude before going on air, when she could take her time reading the script and getting to grips with each news item. In her 12 years on television, she had developed the habit of mentally rehearsing the text, marking difficult words with stress marks. Dexter often teased her about her pedantry. "You're not taking an exam," he would say when he caught her doing this at home. But it was precisely because of this meticulousness that she became the anchor of the main evening news program. At 37, she was the youngest anchor on the channel. Martha, the makeup artist, peeked in the door. "My goodness, Ethel, you're already here. I thought I was the first one." Ethel smiled. Martha had worked with her from the very beginning, when the young journalist was just trying out for the role of regional news anchor. Back then, she was still Ethel Donovan, an independent girl with ambitions and a journalism degree. While Martha worked her magic on her face, Ethel remembered the evening she met Dexter. She was interviewing the CFO of a large technology company, and Dexter, then a regular manager, was helping his boss with the presentation. After the shoot, he caught up with her in the hallway and asked for her phone number. "To clarify some details of the interview," he said with that special smile that made Ethel's heart flutter. Their first date was at a small jazz bar. Dexter talked about his work, his plans, his ambitions, and she listened, propping her chin up with her hand. She could sense the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he wanted out of life. It was captivating. 6 months later, they were married. "Ethel, are you there?" Martha's voice brought her back to reality. "Sorry, I was lost in thought. I'm asking if the shadows are more natural today or the same as usual." There were 2 hours left before the broadcast. Ethel rehearsed the text with the director and discussed the news order with the editor. Everything was as usual: precise movements, measured intonations. She loved this routine, which turned the chaos of events into a smooth flow of information. Dexter called. "Sorry, honey, I'll be late today. Important meeting with investors." This had been happening more and more often in recent months. Important meetings, unscheduled meetings. He used to always try to be home by the time she went on the air, and they would watch the broadcast together, and he would comment on her work. Now this tradition had almost been forgotten. The broadcast went smoothly. The news was the usual: politics, economics, tomorrow's weather. Ethel smiled mechanically at the camera, her voice sounding steady and professional. Only at the very end did she almost stumble when she noticed the empty director's chair. Dexter usually sat there at that time, if he came to the broadcast. She returned home at 11 o'clock. The spacious apartment was silent. There was a note on the kitchen table. "Don't wait for me. The meeting will be late." Dexter's handwriting seemed more careless than usual, as if he was in a hurry. Ethel poured herself a glass of wine and went out onto the balcony. The city bustled below, lights shining in the neighboring windows. She took out her phone, wanting to text her husband, but changed her mind. Lately, their correspondence had become increasingly formal, short messages about their plans for the day, followed by a polite "love you" at the end. Time dragged on slowly. At midnight, she checked her phone. No calls, no messages. At 1 in the morning, she tried to sleep, but sleep would not come. At 3 o'clock, she got up, drank some water, and went back to bed. For the first time in their marriage, Dexter had not warned her that he would not be coming home. In the morning, she woke up to the alarm clock. The bed next to her was untouched. At work, Ethel acted as usual. Her profession had taught her to hide her emotions. Even when announcing disasters, a news anchor must remain calm. She worked flawlessly during the morning broadcast, and no one noticed that she had hardly slept all night. After the broadcast, Ethel locked herself in her office. Dexter's phone was unavailable, and he hadn't been on Messenger since the previous evening. She opened her laptop and logged into his account. She had known the password since helping her husband set up his new computer. There was nothing suspicious in his email, just the usual business correspondence. His calendar did indeed show a meeting with investors for last night. Ethel leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She remembered how happy Dexter had been about his first promotion. Back then, he had shared all his news with her. He was 3 years younger than her, but his career growth was impressive. A talented financier, he knew how to get along with the right people. His colleagues respected him for his business acumen and ability to make difficult decisions. The first warning signs appeared 2 years ago, at a party celebrating her appointment as anchor of the main news program. Dexter drank heavily and was unusually quiet. At home, he confessed that he was tired of being the husband of a TV star. "Do you know what they call me at the office? Mr. Bradbury, can you imagine? Not even by my first name." Ethel hugged him and told him she was proud of his achievements and that his career was just as important. He smiled, but something in his eyes had changed. The phone vibrated, a message from one of Dexter's colleagues. "Hi, sorry to bother you. Just wanted to check if everything was okay. Dexter didn't show up for the morning meeting, which isn't like him." Ethel felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat. She found a list of employees on the company's social media page. Young faces flashed before her eyes until she stopped at the photo of a girl in her mid-20s. Veronica Page, finance intern. Dexter had mentioned her in passing, a talented graduate with a promising future. Ethel clicked on Veronica's profile. It was the classic story of a small-town girl who made it big in the city. Veronica came from a small town in Idaho, graduated from university with honors, and completed an internship at a prestigious company. Her feed was full of photos from trendy restaurants, the gym, and business meetings. Flawless makeup, expensive clothes, a confident smile. Ethel began to look at the photos more closely. Here was Veronica at a company party, standing in a group of colleagues in an elegant black dress. Dexter was in the background, but his gaze was clearly directed at the young intern. The next photo was of a business lunch with the team. Veronica was sitting next to Dexter, and they were engaged in lively conversation. Another photo taken a month ago shows the opening of a new office. Dexter is holding the door open for Veronica. Just being polite? Perhaps. She found Veronica's phone number in her work contacts. 3 rings, then a woman's voice. "Hello?" Ethel hesitated for a second. "Hello, this is Ethel Bradbury. Could you please tell my husband that his phone is unavailable?" Pause. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Come on, Veronica, where is he?" Silence on the line, then the sound of a dropped call. Ethel looked at her reflection in the turned-off monitor. She remembered their honeymoon in Hawaii. Dexter, learning to surf, falling off the board, laughing. Their first apartment, small but cozy. Weekends together, trips, plans for the future. When did everything start to change? There was a knock at the door. It was time to get ready for the evening broadcast. Ethel took her lipstick out of her purse and touched up her lips with a familiar gesture. She caught herself doing it mechanically, like so many things lately. Their marriage had become like that too, a set of familiar actions, a ritual without meaning. A new notification popped up on her phone screen. Veronica Page had deleted her social media profile. Ethel smiled sadly. In the news, they call this indirect confirmation. She ran her hand over her eyes, wiping away non-existent fatigue. There were 3 hours left before she went on air, and during that time she had to do her makeup, rehearse her lines, and check the script. Life went on, even if it now seemed somehow unreal, like a reflection in a crooked mirror. Ethel didn't usually read the comments under her posts online. There was too much negativity and pointless arguments. But today she methodically scanned all her social media platforms. In one of the discussions about yesterday's show, she came across a photo from Le Petit, an elegant restaurant in the business district. The blurry picture showed two people at a table in the back, a man in a gray suit and a girl in a beige dress. The comment under the photo read, "The host doesn't even know where her husband is having dinner." 3 days ago, when Dexter said he would be late from work, he was here, with Veronica. Ethel wasn't surprised. Her intuition had kicked in earlier when she noticed small changes in her husband's behavior. A new perfume, more carefully chosen suits, an unexpected passion for fitness. It was as if he was trying to rejuvenate himself, to regain something he had lost. Now, looking through the company's work photos from the past year, she could see it more clearly. The glances, the accidental touches, the too frequent coincidences at business meetings. As a journalist, she knew there was nothing more obvious than what people were trying to hide. She remembered the evening 2 years ago when she and Dexter had been invited to dinner by the company's owner, Harrison Wells. The elderly billionaire lived alone in a huge mansion filled with strange and amazing things. In his study, an entire wall was covered with vintage radio receivers. "My first love," Garrison had said, stroking the lacquered case of a pre-war radio. "As a child, I dreamed of becoming a radio operator. I learned Morse code and built radios from scrap materials. Can you imagine, Miss Bradbury? There was only one radio station in our town, but for me, it was a window to the big world." Ethel remembered how enthusiastically he talked about the history of radio and how he used to tap messages to his friend through the wall of his house. "Here, look." He tapped a simple rhythm on the table with his fingers. "That means hello. And this means I'm here." Dexter was clearly bored at the time, but Ethel was mesmerized. She asked him to teach her a few simple combinations. The next day at the office, she found information about Veronica Page, the one who wasn't on social media. She was a girl from a town with a population of less than 3,000. Her father was a mechanic, and her mother worked at the local library. She was an excellent student and received a scholarship to study at a prestigious university. She wrote for the student newspaper and dreamed of a career as a financial analyst. In her resume, Ethel saw a familiar story. A young, ambitious provincial girl willing to do anything to succeed in the big city. Ethel had once been like that, only her path lay through journalism. But unlike Veronica, she had never tried to build a career through sex. Dexter's phone was still unavailable. Ethel opened Veronica's locked profile on another social network. The photos from the last month had been taken in different cities: Chicago, Boston, Seattle. Business trips? Hardly. More likely, checking out new places to live. In the evening, while preparing for the broadcast, Ethel remembered Harrison's lessons. Her fingers tapped out a simple rhythm on the table. "I'm here." She froze. I wonder how many viewers know Morse code. There must be communities of radio amateurs, people who are fascinated by old ways of communication. What if... Martha knocked on the door. It was time to go to the studio. Ethel glanced in the mirror one last time. Her makeup was flawless, her smile confident, her usual professional mask in place. Veronica wore the same mask, that of an ambitious career woman. Dexter wore the same mask, that of a successful financier and model husband. Over the years working in television, Ethel had learned to understand the power of information. A single news story could destroy a politician's career, crash a company's stock, change public opinion. But the most effective messages are not always conveyed in words. She entered the studio and took her usual place at the desk. The cameras were not yet on, and the lighting technicians were adjusting the lights. Her fingers rested on the desk, ready for the first beat of a silent message. The director gave the command, 5 seconds to air. Ethel smiled at the camera with her trademark smile. Somewhere in another city, Dexter and Veronica were making plans for a new life, unaware that their carefully constructed masks were about to crack. The familiar news melody sounded in her earphones. Ethel's hands lay calmly on the table. She knew that sometimes a message sent in a secret code could be louder than the loudest scream. Over her morning cup of coffee, Ethel habitually opened her banking app. She blinked, not believing her eyes. 0. She refreshed the page. 0 again. With trembling fingers, she opened her savings account, then her investment account. Empty. Everywhere. Where impressive sums had once stood, now there were zeros. Her first impulse was to call the bank. Surely it was some kind of system error. But deep down, she already knew there was no mistake. Dexter had simply prepared more thoroughly than she had anticipated. The withdrawal records were dated yesterday morning. The transactions had been made in sequence, a few minutes apart, as if someone had methodically emptied the account one by one. Ethel could imagine Dexter sitting in a cafe, hunched over his phone, calmly transferring their joint savings to new accounts she didn't know about. She smiled wryly, a nationally known TV presenter, and now she was penniless. However, her salary was quite decent, and she had a small amount in a separate account that Dexter didn't know about, her personal safety net. It was a journalist's habit to always have a backup plan. In the evening, after returning home from the broadcast, Ethel took out her old laptop. She typed Morse code for beginners into the search engine. Dozens of websites, instructional videos, and amateur radio forums popped up. She chose the simplest tutorial and immersed herself in studying. The first combinations were difficult. Dots and dashes formed letters, letters formed words, but her fingers got tangled up and she lost her rhythm. Ethel played a recording of her last broadcast, trying to imagine how she would tap out a message while reading the news. The movements had to look natural, as if she were just tapping her fingers on the table out of slight nervousness. By midnight, she had mastered the basic combinations. Husband, cheating, betrayal, money. She repeated these words over and over until the movements became automatic. At one point, she caught herself thinking that it was like preparing for her first broadcast. The same frantic memorization, the same fear of making a mistake. The studio was bustling as usual. The lighting technicians were adjusting the lights, and the sound engineer was checking the microphones. Ethel sat down at the table and straightened her shoulders. Her fingers rested on the tabletop. She had rehearsed this movement so many times during the night. Good evening, this is the news. Her fingers began to tap out the rhythm, slowly, clearly, just as she had taught herself the night before. My husband stole our money. Pause. Next news item. Next report. He ran away with his mistress. New story, new beat. She imagined how somewhere an old radio enthusiast would suddenly look up from his newspaper and listen to the familiar rhythm. How a young enthusiast learning Morse code would start writing down the strange signals from the news anchor. How the first discussions would appear on the internet. After the broadcast, Ethel returned to her empty apartment. Dexter's note from 2 days ago was still lying on the kitchen table. She crumpled up the piece of paper and threw it in the trash can. Another night of practice lay ahead. Tomorrow, she planned to transmit a longer message. Settling down with her laptop in an armchair, she opened a new textbook on Morse code. A silent replay of her evening broadcast was playing on the TV screen. Her fingers automatically tapped out the rhythm on the armrest. Dot, dash, dot, betrayal, dash, dot, dash, retribution. Streetlights poured light into the window, and somewhere in the distance the night city hummed. Ethel thought that Dexter was probably awake too, counting the stolen money and making plans for his new life. I wonder if he told Veronica about the emptied accounts. Had he warned her that now they would have to run not only from his wife, but also from the law? She picked up her phone and opened her banking app. The zeros in her accounts no longer caused her panic. Now they were just fuel for revenge. A few dots and dashes were enough to destroy the fugitive's carefully constructed plan. All it would take was one observant viewer for the story to start spreading. Ethel smiled at her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. Maybe Dexter was right when he said she paid too much attention to detail, but it was precisely this trait that was now working in her favor. After all, Morse code was just a set of details, dots, and dashes that formed a message. There were only a few hours left before dawn. Her fingers continued to tap out invisible messages, each movement becoming more confident. She was ready for tomorrow's broadcast. Actually, it would be much more interesting this way. Let's rewrite the chapter from the perspective of a fictional character named Jeffrey Baxter, a 32-year-old programmer who lives alone and is fascinated by radio communication and Morse code. Jeffrey watched the news every evening, not because he was particularly interested in politics or the weather, but because he liked the anchor. Ethel Bradbury had a pleasant voice, and when she reported serious events, her fingers tapped lightly on the table as if beating a nervous rhythm. "Stop!" Jeffrey rewound the tape. That rhythm? He took out his notebook and began to write. Dot, dash, dot. It was nonsense. But the longer he watched Ethel's fingers, the clearer it became that this was not a random nervous tick. Each tap formed a letter, and the letters formed words. His first post on the radio wave forum was met with ridicule. "Hey, Morse man, quit drinking energy drinks," someone wrote. "Hallucinations are the first sign that it's time to get some fresh air," another chimed in. Jeffrey rubbed his tired eyes. Maybe they were right? Maybe he really was losing his mind from sitting at the computer for so long. But the next evening, he turned on the news again. His notebook was covered with lines of transcriptions. My husband stole money. Ethel's finger tapped the table clearly and rhythmically, as if sending a distress signal. Jeffrey feverishly wrote down every movement. This time, he didn't just post on the forum. He attached a detailed transcript with time codes. "See for yourselves," he added. "Every movement can be verified. This is no accident." The first to respond was old Roy Adams, a former military signalman. "You're right, man. I noticed something strange, too, but I thought it was just my imagination." Next to join in was Jessica, a student from Berkeley who was studying Morse code for her communications history project. They began collecting messages together. Jeffrey created a separate thread on the forum where he posted transcriptions of each broadcast. The story was heartbreaking. A successful husband had run away with his young mistress, taking all the family savings with him. By the end of the week, the forum thread had grown to 80 pages. Some people recorded the broadcasts on video. Others analyzed the frequency of certain words. Jeffrey hardly slept, afraid of missing a new message. "Maybe we should contact other media outlets," someone suggested in the discussion. Jeffrey thought about it. On the one hand, the story was too incredible. On the other hand, all the evidence was right there in the broadcast recordings. On Friday evening, his phone exploded with notifications. The forum thread had leaked to Twitter. A popular blogger picked up the story, and now thousands of people were discussing it. Jeffrey watched the retweets and comments multiply and felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. On her next broadcast, Ethel was calm and professional as always. But now Jeffrey knew what was behind that calmness. Her fingers were tapping out a new message, and he recorded every beep as usual. Somewhere out there in the big world, her unfaithful husband was probably watching the same news broadcast. I wonder if he realized that every tap of his wife's fingers was bringing him closer to the moment when he would have to answer for his betrayal. Meanwhile, on the forum, people were already theorizing about where the fugitives were hiding and creating programs to automatically recognize the signals. The story was gaining momentum, and Jeffrey realized that what had started as a strange observation by a programmer obsessed with Morse code was turning into something much bigger. Jeffrey woke up to the sound of new notifications, Ever since his thread on the Radio Wave forum went viral, his phone hadn't stopped ringing. He reached for his laptop to check the view stats. Overnight, the number of subscribers had tripled. "Did you see the last broadcast?" Roy wrote. "She gave the coordinates. Looks like the first digits of a zip code." Jeffrey opened yesterday's broadcast. Sure enough, between the foreign policy news and the economic forecast, Ethel's fingers had tapped out a few numbers. While he was analyzing the recording, a new comment appeared in the thread from user Technocat. "Guys, I Googled that zip code. It's Portland, Maine. And guess what I found in the local newspaper? A job posting for a financial director that was posted 2 weeks ago. Coincidence? I don't think so." "Guys, who is this Dexter anyway?" asked a new participant in the investigation. Jeffrey smiled. For him, obsessed with details, it was easy to establish the fugitive's identity. "I found him in 15 minutes, he wrote. There were photos of them together on Ethel's Instagram from 2 months ago. Through mutual tags, I found his account, which had corporate posts and mentions of the company. The rest was easy. He was listed as the CFO, Dexter Bradbury, on the company's website. I figured out who his mistress is." Nickastock joined the conversation, known in their chat for her ability to find people with minimal clues. According to Dexter's Instagram photos, he accidentally reposted several stories with a girl wearing an unusual pendant in the background. I found the same pendant on Veronica's profile. Plus, they liked each other's posts and work photos. It all adds up. She's a young intern from his department. "Wait a minute," she wrote a couple of minutes later. "It gets even more interesting. Over the last month, they both checked in at the same places, but always separately in the photos. Blue Cap Coffee Shop, Le Petit Restaurant, a bookstore and a shopping mall. Too many coincidences." "Here's their latest photo together," someone else in the group added. 3 days ago, at a gas station in the suburbs of Boston. A security guard posted it on Twitter saying he recognized Dexter from the news but didn't immediately realize where. Jeffrey leaned back in his chair. Over the past week, their little investigation had turned into a full-fledged crowdsourcing project. Some analyzed broadcast recordings, others monitored social media, looking for traces of Dexter and his companion. Programmers wrote bots to automatically recognize Morse code signals. Designers created infographics explaining how the messages were transmitted. A subreddit called r/Morsegate appeared on Reddit with tens of thousands of subscribers. Jeffrey became a moderator there, making sure the discussion didn't get out of hand. Threats were deleted immediately. "We are not lynch mobs," he wrote in the community rules. "We are just helping the truth come out." 2 days later, a new topic took off. One of the admins wrote, "Look what I found." Jessica posted a screenshot from a job search site in the chat. David Baker had an interview today at Portland Investment Group. He applied for a financial director position 2 weeks ago. And you know what? His LinkedIn profile was created just a month ago, and his work experience is identical to our Dexter's, only the company names are different. Now, this is interesting. Nickastock added a link to the Instagram of a local coffee shop. The waitress posted a story saying she saw a strange couple today, an older man in an expensive suit and a young girl who was very nervous. She kept looking around and hiding her face from the other customers. There are no photos, but the description matches. Jeffrey opened a map of Portland. The coffee shop was right across from the investment company's office. It seemed too much of a coincidence. "Guys, this is huge," one of their assistants wrote. "A real estate agency posted on Facebook an hour ago about a successful deal. The photo shows a couple looking at a house in the suburbs. The photographer took the picture from behind, but look closely at the man. Same haircut, same suit, even the watch looks similar." "The house is in the Oak Hills neighborhood," Jessica added. "A quiet suburb with expensive cottages. Just right for someone with sudden money." Roy sent another screenshot. A post on a local forum. Someone was complaining about new neighbors moving into the house across the street. They're weird. The woman is very young and the man could be her father, and the car has no license plates. A car with no license plates is important, Jeffrey remarked. Remember the photo from the gas station in Boston? They had a car with no license plates there too. They must change them along the way. Their small headquarters was buzzing like a beehive. Some were checking other real estate agencies. Others were monitoring local bulletin boards. The trail was getting hotter. Jeffrey created a new spreadsheet with notes. Today's message was longer than usual. Portland, I know where you are. Soon everyone will know. He shared his findings with Roy and Jessica. Their small group became the core of the investigation. Look what I found, Jessica wrote. There are only 3 large investment companies in Portland that have recently posted job openings for top managers. Roy added, I checked the registration of new phone numbers in the area. There are several matches. Jeffrey felt the circle closing in. Every day, new details emerged. New witnesses came forward. Someone recognized Dexter at the supermarket. Someone else spotted Veronica at a cafe. Photos, rumors, and guesses were gathered and analyzed in their online headquarters. And Ethel continued her broadcasts. Now she was being watched not only by regular viewers but also by thousands of decoders who caught every movement of her fingers. Jeffrey created a special channel on Telegram where he posted transcriptions in almost real time. You know what's most amazing? He wrote in the evening in their group's private chat. She never stoops to direct insults or threats. Just the facts. What happened, where they are, how much money was stolen. It's elegant. Roy replied almost immediately. That's why it works. If she just cried into the camera or made threats, no one would take her seriously. But this way, damn, I admire that woman. Jeffrey looked at the screen, where a recording of the latest broadcast was playing in a new window. Ethel was just finishing reading the economic news. Her fingers moved almost imperceptibly across the table, as if tapping out the rhythm of an inaudible song. Only now, everyone could hear that rhythm. Jeffrey woke up to Roy's call. The first time this had happened in all the time they had known each other. Turn on CNN, the old communications specialist said instead of greeting him. On the TV screen, a media analyst was discussing an unusual trend on social media. A story worthy of our time, said the host. A devoted wife is using her public profession not for scandal, but for elegant and intellectual revenge. No direct accusations, no tears for the camera, just dots and dashes in Morse code. Jeffrey smiled. He and Roy could be proud of themselves. It was their topic on the Radio Wave forum that had led to this. Over the past week, the number of subscribers had exceeded 100,000, and the hashtag #MorseLady had become a trend on Twitter. Hey guys, Jessica wrote in their private chat. Look what's happening on Twitter. Women are learning Morse code en masse. They say it's a new way to counter male gaslighting. Instead of making a scene, they send secret messages. A new trend appeared on Reddit, with users posting videos demonstrating different ways to discreetly tap out messages in Morse code. Some used foot tapping, others conveyed simple words by blinking, but no one did it as elegantly as Ethel. Here's what I'll tell you, Roy wrote that evening. In 20 years as a communications officer, I've never seen anything like it. She's using an ancient method of communication on live TV, right under the noses of millions of viewers. And she does it so naturally that no one would have guessed if it weren't for our Jeff. A message came into their chat from a new member, a journalist from the Washington Post. She wanted to interview the team that had uncovered Ethel's messages. Jeffrey hesitated. On the one hand, the press attention could help the investigation. On the other hand, they risked scaring Dexter away before his time. God, have you seen the new trend on TikTok? Wrote Nikastalk. Girls are recording videos of themselves learning Morse code. The most popular one has already gotten 1 million views. A young student shows how she learned the SOS signal in 5 minutes. Jeffrey's phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. "Good evening, Mr. Baxter. This is Garrison Wells." Jeffrey almost dropped the phone. The owner of the company where Dexter worked was calling him. "I've been following your investigation. Impressive work. And even more impressive work by Mrs. Bradbury." They talked for almost an hour. Wells told him about the evening he taught Ethel the basics of Morse code, about her attention to detail. "You know, young man, I've been collecting old radio sets for many years, but I never thought I'd witness such a revival of this art." Meanwhile, new information appeared in their chat. One of Dexter's colleagues finally figured out what was going on and sent him a message with a link to the Twitter discussion. He opened the link, their informant reported, and immediately deleted his profile. "Everyone, look." Jessica sent a screenshot of the listing for the house in Portland. The same cottage that Mr. Baker had recently bought was back on the market. "They're going to run." "They won't make it," Roy wrote. "The local radio amateurs have already been notified. Every gas station, every motel within 100 miles is under surveillance. And why run? The whole country already knows their story." Ethel looked particularly elegant on the evening news. Her fingers tapped out a new message, and now it could be read not only by experts like Jeffrey. Thousands of people across the country followed her fingers, admiring the elegance of her revenge. "You know what's cool?" Nika Stalk wrote late that night. "She never lied, never exaggerated, never resorted to insults. Just the facts. Her husband ran away, stole money, and is living with his mistress. Try to find fault with that. And now women all over the world are learning Morse code because it's stylish?" Jeffrey smiled as he looked at the computer screen. Their little investigation had turned into a cultural phenomenon. And somewhere in Portland, a man calling himself David Baker was probably sitting in front of his TV, realizing that his perfectly planned escape had been ruined by a few keystrokes. Martha worked intently on Ethel's makeup while sharing the latest news. Even people who never watched TV were tuning in to see their show. And what was happening online? Ethel listened silently. She found it amusing how her personal story had become a media phenomenon. When she returned home in the evening, she found a note from the concierge in her mailbox. Mr. Wells wanted to see her. Harrison Wells. Her first thought was to refuse. She was too tired after the broadcast. But something in the formal tone of the note made her agree. An hour later, he was sitting in her living room looking exactly the same as he had 2 years ago. Impeccable suit, thin-rimmed glasses, attentive gaze. "You're making good use of my lessons, Mrs. Bradbury," he remarked as he accepted a cup of tea. An hour later, he was sitting in her living room looking exactly the same as he had 2 years ago. Immaculate suit, thin-rimmed glasses, attentive gaze. "You're putting my lessons to good use, Mrs. Bradbury," he remarked, accepting a cup of tea. "I never would have thought that my childhood hobby of Morse code would find such an unusual application. You know, I watch every one of your broadcasts. It's delightful. Not a single unnecessary movement. Everything is natural, elegant." He paused. "And most importantly, it's flawless from a legal and ethical standpoint. You're just tapping your fingers on the table. Who could possibly accuse you of anything?" His phone vibrated in his pocket. Another message from a mutual acquaintance. Over the past few days, Dexter had called on everyone he knew, former classmates, family friends, even her parents. "Ethel, let's talk. We need to discuss everything. Maybe we should meet up?" She didn't answer. The news flashed across the TV screen. Psychologists, sociologists, and cultural experts were discussing her story. Some wrote about a new form of female protest. Others analyzed the phenomenon of social media. Time magazine had commissioned a major article on the revival of interest in Morse code. "By the way, about your husband," Garrison put down his cup. "He tried to contact me. He offered to settle the situation. Ethel smiled. Of course, Dexter hated publicity. He had always envied her fame, her ability to be the center of attention. And now he was at the center of a media scandal, and it was driving him crazy. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Veronica. "Please, let's meet. I'll explain everything." Ethel shook her head. What was there to explain? A young woman had fallen for a successful man, and he had fallen for her youth. A banal story, only with an unusual ending. "You know," Garrison stood up, getting ready to leave. "I learned Morse code because I dreamed of long-distance communication. I wanted my messages to be heard thousands of miles away. But you exceeded all my expectations. Your messages are truly heard around the world." He paused at the door. "And if you ever need any support, I'm at your service. It's not every day you witness such a masterful performance." Left alone, Ethel turned on her laptop. Something incredible was happening on Twitter. Girls were posting videos of themselves learning Morse code so they could follow her broadcasts. Already over 2 million views. Tomorrow she would be on air again. She looked through the script, her fingers automatically tapping out the rhythm on the table. Dot, dash, dot. And the truth would become public knowledge, needing no further comment. The TV was showing a rerun of her evening show. Ethel watched herself from the outside. Perfect posture, calm voice, light movements of her fingers on the table. I wonder if Dexter realizes how his desire for anonymity has turned into worldwide fame. Dexter downed his third glass of whiskey. The staff at the Anchor Bar were used to his nightly appearance, a silent man in a rumpled suit who arrived at 7 and stayed until closing time, staring at the TV screen. Ethel was in her usual form, immaculate hair, calm voice. Only her fingers tapped slightly on the table, telling the whole country the story of his disgrace. He smiled wryly. For so many years he had envied her popularity, and now he was the center of attention. Not quite what he had dreamed of. In the morning, Veronica didn't come to breakfast. He found a short note on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry. I can't go on like this." Her phone was off. Her things were gone. Funny. That was exactly how he had left a note for Ethel 2 weeks ago. He remembered his last conversation with Veronica. She was pacing around the apartment, wringing her hands. "Do you see what's happening? The whole country is talking about us. People are pointing at me in the store. Some lunatics are posting our every move on the internet, and you just sit there and drink." He didn't know what to say. What could he say? His phone vibrated in his pocket. Another old acquaintance was trying to talk some sense into him. Dexter swiped away the notification. All these people who had once fawned over the successful financial director were now competing to condemn him. Some called with sympathy, others with poorly concealed schadenfreude. He waved to the bartender, asking him to repeat the order. On the screen, Ethel was finishing the evening news. Her fingers tapped out the last message. He had already learned to recognize his name in these combinations of dots and dashes. Dexter remembered that evening at Garrison Wells's house when Ethel listened so intently to the old man's stories about radio. He had been openly bored thinking about his meeting with Veronica the next day. Who knew that his childhood fascination with Morse code would become the instrument of his public execution? Veronica had been talking about it for the last few days. They had to do something. They couldn't just sit and watch their life fall apart. But what could he do? Sue his wife for tapping her fingers on the table? Ridiculous. In the bar's restroom, he overheard 2 guys discussing that idiot who traded the Morse lady for a young girl. He barely restrained himself from attacking them. Instead, he simply left, leaving his whiskey untouched. On his way home, he stopped at an electronics store window. All the screens were showing a news replay. Ethel was receiving some kind of journalism award. She looked stunning, speaking calmly and with dignity. No malice, no accusations. just fingers tapping out the truth on the table with nowhere to hide. He remembered their first meeting, a young journalist interviewing his boss. She was so passionate about her work, so natural in front of the camera. Her career took off rapidly. She soon became a familiar face on the channel, while he was still languishing in junior management. Then, his status began to rise, but everyone knew him as the husband of that Ethel Bradbury. Veronica was different. She admired him, hung on his every word. At 25, she looked at him the way Ethel hadn't looked at him in a long time. It all started with harmless lunches, discussing work. He explained the intricacies of financial planning to her, and she smiled gratefully. When exactly did it turn into something more? He didn't want to go home. Their rented apartment was too quiet now. Dexter wandered through the night streets looking at his reflection in shop windows. When had he gotten so old? Passers-by glanced at him with recognition. The entire internet was flooded with his photos. He took out his phone and opened his email. A letter from HR. His application for the position of financial director was no longer being considered. Of course, who would want an employee who had become a meme? An unread message from Veronica's mother was waiting for him in his messenger app. "She's back home. Don't try to contact her." Dexter smiled sadly. Well, he could understand her. What mother would want that fate for her daughter? To be the mistress of a man whose name had become a household word? Ethel always knew how to turn defeat into victory. He, on the other hand, seemed to only know how to turn victory into defeat. It was funny. He thought he was humiliating her by leaving, but in the end, she turned the whole story into a work of art. Now her name will go down in journalism textbooks, and his, maybe in a collection of memes. The night porter at their hotel turned away pointedly when Dexter walked by. Even here, hundreds of miles from their former life, he was recognized. Dots and dashes followed him everywhere, turning him into the hero of a story he didn't want to tell. Jeffrey was about to go to bed when a message from Nick Stalk popped up in their chat. "Urgent! Dexter Bradbury spotted at our city airport." Attached to the message was a blurry photo, a wrinkled suit, stubble, dark circles under his eyes. "Checking flights," Jessica wrote. "He flew in from Portland on the evening flight, alone." Roy immediately replied, "I have a source at the Plaza Hotel. Dexter booked a room there. He says he looks terrible and immediately ordered a bottle of whiskey to his room." In the morning, a new bombshell hit the internet. The Daily Star tabloid published a long interview with Veronica. She told her side of the story, how she fell in love with a successful man, how she believed his promises, how she didn't know about the money he stole. "When he suggested we leave, I thought it was a romantic adventure," the tabloid quoted Veronica as saying. "But in the end, we were just hiding in rented apartments and he was drinking and watching the news with her on it. I realized he never loved me. He just used me to feel important." Jeffrey opened a map of the city on the second monitor. Their informants reported on Dexter's movements. He had visited his former lawyer's office, then an old pub where he had once celebrated a promotion, and for some reason had stopped by the house he had shared with Ethel. "Look!" Jessica sent a screenshot from a surveillance camera at the TV studio. Dexter was standing at the entrance but didn't go inside. He was just staring at the building where his wife had told the world about their story every day. A new participant unexpectedly joined their chat, Harrison Wells's assistant. "Mr. Wells asked me to let you know that he is meeting with Mrs. Bradbury today. You might be interested." The meeting took place in Harrison's private office. The surveillance cameras they had hacked thanks to Jeffrey's abilities showed Ethel sitting in a chair, calm and collected as always. Garrison was saying something and she was listening intently. "I have some inside information," Nika Stalk wrote an hour later. "Wells offered her a seat on the media holding company's board of directors. He says that such a talent for communication cannot be overlooked." Their small team watched the events unfold as if it were an exciting TV series. Some rooted for Ethel, some felt sorry for Veronica, and some even sympathized with Dexter. But everyone agreed that the story was epic. Towards evening, Dexter's official statement appeared online. He admitted his guilt, promised to return the money, and asked his wife for forgiveness. "I made a mistake and am ready to take responsibility for it," he wrote. The public reacted coolly to the statement, too late, too formal. And Ethel simply went on air as usual. Her fingers tapped out a short message. Some stories cannot be rewritten. She continued reading the news as if nothing had happened. The dressing room of Kyle Brown's evening show smelled of flowers and perfume. Everyone knew the host loved lilies. Ethel sat in front of the mirror while the local makeup artist worked her magic. Martha had insisted on coming with her, but now she was nervously smoking in the parking lot. It annoyed her when someone else did her anchor's makeup. 5 minutes. The assistant peeked in. Ethel nodded. She knew all the questions. They had been sent in advance. She also knew that Kyle would definitely stray from the agreed-upon list. Well, she hadn't worked on live TV for 12 years for nothing. The studio greeted her with applause. Kyle, as always impeccable in his dark blue suit, stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a guest who made all of America learn Morse code." Ethel sat down in her chair and smoothed her skirt. The cameras focused on her, ready to capture every gesture, every movement of her fingers. "So, Mrs. Bradbury, may we call you Ethel?" She nodded. "Wonderful. Ethel, the whole country is talking about your, let's say, unusual news broadcasts, but you haven't commented on the situation once. Why?" She smiled. "Why should I, Kyle? In today's world, who needs additional commentary? Everyone has the opportunity to see for themselves." "And yet," Kyle leaned forward, "many claim that your broadcasts contain coded messages. Is that true?" "You know," Ethel placed her hands on the armrests of her chair, "I'm just doing my job, reporting the news. People are free to interpret what they see. But you studied Morse code, didn't you? At that memorable dinner at Mr. Wells' house?" "Yes, I did. It's an amazing system of communication, don't you think? Simple and elegant. A dot, a dash, and you can send any message." Her fingers tapped lightly on the armrest. Someone in the room gasped. Had they recognized the rhythm? Kyle squinted. What are you talking about, Kyle?" She smiled even more radiantly. "I'm just nervous. It's not every day I get to visit you." He laughed. "Amazing. Just amazing. You know, our viewers have literally inundated us with questions for you. For example, is it true that you've had offers from 3 major channels? I'm perfectly happy with my job at the moment. What about your husband? I mean, your ex-husband?" "We all have our own paths, Kyle," she shrugged. "Some choose the straight and narrow, others prefer the winding road." The audience responded with approving murmurs. Kyle paused. "But still, how do you manage to stay so calm, such dignity in such a difficult situation?" "Years of working on live television." Ethel tilted her head slightly. "You know, when you report on wars, disasters, global crises, you learn to keep yourself under control. And this situation, is it like a disaster for you?" "No, not at all." She tapped her fingers on the armrest again. "It's more like a news story. Every day something good happens and something bad happens. My job is just to report on it." After the show, Martha was waiting for her at the exit. "Did you see how they were all watching your fingers? I bet they're already analyzing the footage frame by frame." Ethel smiled. She knew that tomorrow the internet would explode with attempts to decipher her messages from today. Someone would find a secret meaning in every tap. Someone would argue about the significance of the pauses. The intercom rang around 9 in the evening. Ethel was just making tea and looking over the script for tomorrow's broadcast. Dexter's face appeared on the intercom screen, haggard and unshaven. The last time he had been in this apartment was 3 weeks ago. Nothing had changed. The same paintings on the walls, the same knickknacks on the shelves. Only now he was standing in the hallway, not knowing what to do with his hands, while she calmly poured tea, as if a casual neighbor had dropped by. "I want my money back," he began. Ethel nodded, not looking up from her cup. "Every penny. I've already started transferring it to your account." She was silent. "And I sold the car I bought for Veronica. And the ring." In the silence, he could hear the ticking of the clock, the one they had bought at an antique shop on their 5th wedding anniversary. Dexter remembered how Ethel had admired the mechanism, which resembled a music box. "You know," she finally looked up, "it's funny. You talk about money as if it's the most important thing." Her fingers tapped lightly on the table, a habit that had become famous. "But it didn't start with money." "I know." He sat down in the chair opposite her. I got confused. Veronica seemed like such a simple solution. Young, enthusiastic, not as successful as you." Ethel smiled. "So, it's my success? I thought it was your inability to be honest." "I tried to be honest." Dexter took a sip of tea. "But what's it like to be married to a celebrity? All those looks, the whispering in the office. 'Oh, that's Ethel's husband.' No one saw me as a professional, as a manager, only as your husband." "And that's why you decided to steal our money?" "No, I started transferring money when I realized it was serious. With Veronica, I thought I'd start a new life." Veronica stood up and walked over to the window. The evening city bustled below, lights shining in the neighboring windows. "I wonder how many people are watching her broadcast right now, trying to decipher the messages." "A new life," she repeated. "And how did that work out?" Dexter shook his head. "You know it didn't. Veronica ran away. I lost my job. Who's going to hire a man who's become a meme? Even in another city, people would recognize me. What did you expect? That I'd cry on camera? Make a public scene?" "Honestly, yes. That would have been easier to understand. But that damn Morse code. Now the whole internet knows our story, but there's nothing to criticize. You didn't even lie once." Ethel returned to the table. "Why lie? The truth is much more interesting. Your husband ran off with a young mistress, stealing your family savings. It's cliché to the point of teeth grinding, but the way it was presented." Her fingers tapped out a short combination on the table. "What did you just send? What does it matter? The main thing is that everyone notices it now. Every gesture, every tap. Funny, isn't it?" Dexter took an envelope out of his pocket. "Here are all the account documents. I really want to pay everything back." "Put it on the table," she said without even looking at the envelope. "The lawyers will sort it out." "Ethel, you know what's funny?" she interrupted. "You thought you were humiliating me by leaving, but in the end, this whole thing has made me even more popular. 3 TV channels have offered me contracts, and publishers want to publish a book. I received an award for innovative approach to communication. Funny, isn't it?" He was silent. Rain began to fall outside, the drops drumming on the glass in a random rhythm. "I have to go." Dexter stood up. "I'm meeting with the lawyers tomorrow to arrange the return of the money." Ethel nodded without looking at him. Her fingers tapped something on the table, maybe another message, or maybe just a random rhythm. Jeffrey rubbed his eyes wearily when Nick Stalk sent a message. "New development. Dexter returned all the money." Attached to the message was a screenshot of a bank notification, leaked online by someone. Their small team of sleuths gathered in full force on the forum. "Is this the end of the story?" asked one of the newbies. Roy, with his military experience, was the first to respond. "There's nothing more difficult than ending an operation beautifully." The evening news began as usual. Ethel looked flawless. Cream suit, pearl earrings, a slight smile. Jessica was the first to notice the change in her movements. Look, she's sending something new. Jeffrey opened the signal analysis program. Thank you, everyone. That's it. A simple message, without drama or pathos. Silence fell in their chat room. Everyone realized that they had witnessed the end of an amazing story. The next day, the news broke at the TV station. Ethel Bradbury was taking an extended leave of absence. No comments, no explanations. Martha, her loyal makeup artist, only smiled mysteriously in response to her colleagues' questions. A week later, a single photo appeared on Instagram. A sunset over the ocean somewhere in the Caribbean. No caption, no geotag. Just a blurred strip of horizon where the sea merged with the sky. Ethel sat on an empty beach, watching the sun go down. Behind her, the sand crunched. It was Maria, the owner of the small bungalow where she was staying. "Are you having dinner? Jose brought some fresh shrimp." "Thanks, later. I want to wait until the sun goes down." Maria sat down next to her, adjusting her faded straw hat. "You're not like the other tourists. They usually rush around the island with their phones, taking pictures of every bush." I deliberately hid my phone away. "That's right," Maria smiled. "Here, you just need to be. Look at the ocean. Listen to the waves." In the distance, dolphins appeared, their fins flashing in the setting sun. Ethel remembered her morning conversation with the diving instructor. "Are you sure you've never swum with dolphins?" he asked, showing her how the equipment worked. "Never. I always thought, once I finish this project, once I deliver that broadcast." And then something happened. "Yes, you could say that." He nodded understandingly. "Many people come here after something. Divorce, job loss, loss. The ocean heals." "I wasn't sick," Ethel smiled. "I just wanted some peace and quiet." Now, watching the dolphins, she thought about tomorrow's dive. No cameras, no spectators. Just her and these amazing creatures. "You know," Maria stood up, brushing the sand off her skirt, "we have a belief on the island. If you see dolphins at sunset, it means a new life is beginning." "A new life?" Ethel raised an eyebrow. "That sounds too pompous," Maria laughed. "Maybe. But I've seen so many stories in my 20 years on the island. People arrive alone and leave completely different. But I don't want to change. I like my job, my life. It's not about becoming a different person. Sometimes you just need to stop, be quiet, listen to the ocean." Ethel nodded. She remembered sitting in a small coastal cafe that morning, reading a book. Just a book, not a script, not the news, not analysis. How the old fisherman told her about the habits of dolphins, not knowing who she was. How she arranged with the yacht captain to meet the sunrise on the open sea. "Should I serve dinner after all?" Maria was already getting ready to leave. "Yes, I think so. And if Jose hasn't sold all the shrimp, he left them for you. He said, 'This gringa doesn't call every 5 minutes. She can be trusted with the good shrimp.'" They laughed. Somewhere in the big world, the news continued to rage, headlines changed, and sensations were born. But here, on a small island, time flowed differently. "You know what?" Ethel got up from the sand. "Let's have dinner together. Tell me more about your local beliefs." The dolphins flashed through the waves one last time and disappeared. The sun touched the horizon. A new life? No, just a respite. A quiet pause between signals. Ahead lay a morning with dolphins, dawn on the ocean, long conversations with people who didn't care how many followers you had. And then she would return, to the cameras, to the airwaves, to the news. But that would be later. For now, she could just enjoy Jose's shrimp for dinner, listen to Maria's stories, and not think about how every gesture could become a message.